Right, so picture this. You're the leader of a local council. You've just spent 12 months trying to calm down your community after protests, a horrific sex attack, and an actual arson attack at an asylum hotel. You're exhausted, your residents are furious, and you're desperately trying to piece things back together. And then, just when you think it can't get any worse, the government decides to plunk 8 more flats full of asylum seekers right in your district. Yeah, but before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on the UK Political Insight. Thank you. That's Epping right now, and the council leader is absolutely losing it at Keir Starmer. Welcome to UK Political Insight, where we dive into the chaos so you don't have to. Let's get into it. So, Epping Forest District Council is not holding back. Chris Whitbread, the council leader, has written what can only be described as an absolutely blistering letter to the Prime Minister. And honestly, if words could scorch paper, this thing would have set Downing Street on fire. He's calling out Sir Keir for what he describes as crass insensitivity over plans to house more asylum seekers in the area. And before anyone jumps down my throat, let's be clear. This isn't about being anti-refugee or anti-compassion. This is about a community that has been through the absolute wringer over the past year, and the government seemingly ignoring all of that. Let's rewind a bit and set the scene. Epping has had a catastrophic year, according to Whitbread. And that's not hyperbole. The Bell Hotel, a local landmark, was turned into accommodation for asylum seekers. Fine, you might say, that's government policy. Except then it became a flashpoint for nationwide protests. Why? Because a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by a 41-year-old Ethiopian migrant named Hadish Kabatu, who was staying at the hotel. Let that sink in for a second. A child was attacked, and understandably, the local community absolutely erupted. Protests didn't just stay in Epping either. They spread to Waltham Abbey, Loughton, Buckhurst Hill. The whole district was engulfed in fear, anger, and anxiety. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, there's a second asylum hotel in the area called the Phoenix. And get this, it was partially destroyed in an arson attack at the beginning of 2025 by one of the residents. So you've got one hotel linked to a sexual assault on a child, another hotel literally set on fire by someone living there, and a community that feels completely overwhelmed and unheard. And the government's response? Let's add 8 more flats for asylum-seeking families. Brilliant. Absolutely genius. What could possibly go wrong? Chris Whitbread is understandably furious. In his letter to Starmer, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, Justice Secretary David Lammy, and Housing Secretary Steve Reed, he calls the timing and approach tone deaf. And honestly, can you blame him? The council and local partners are trying to stabilize the situation, trying to help their community recover from a year of chaos, and then the Home Office contractor Clear Springs comes along with this proposal like nothing's happened. It's like someone trying to clean up after a house fire, and their mate rocks up with a flamethrower saying, "Hey, need some help?" "No, mate, we're good, thanks." Whitbread doesn't mince his words either. He describes the proposals as incomprehensible and ludicrous, and he's begging the government to reconsider, intervene, and stop this before it goes any further. And you know what? I get it. It's not about refusing to help people in need. It's about timing, capacity, and actually listening to the people on the ground who are dealing with the fallout of these policies every single day. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture here, because this isn't just an Epping problem. Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to end the use of hotels for asylum seekers by the end of Parliament in 2029. Noble goal, sure, but he's apparently trying to speed things up, with unconfirmed reports suggesting he's privately set a deadline for next year. Next year! That's a pretty aggressive timeline considering how complicated and sensitive this issue is. And part of the plan involves moving 900 migrants into 2 barracks, one in Cameron in Inverness and another at Crowborough Training Camp in East Sussex. So basically, the government's trying to shift people out of hotels and into other forms of accommodation as quickly as possible. But the question is, are they doing it thoughtfully, or are they just moving the problem around without addressing the underlying concerns of local communities? Because here's the thing, housing asylum seekers is a logistical nightmare, but it's also a deeply human issue. On one side, you've got vulnerable people fleeing war, persecution, and danger who desperately need safety and stability. On the other side, you've got communities like Epping that are genuinely struggling to cope with the rapid influx, the lack of resources, and the occasional but devastating incidents that fuel fear and resentment. And when the government doesn't seem to be listening to those communities, when they just steamroll ahead with plans that feel insensitive or poorly timed, it breeds anger, it breeds division, and it makes an already difficult situation infinitely worse. Chris Whitbread's letter is a cry for help from a council that feels abandoned. He's not saying, don't house asylum seekers anywhere. He's saying, don't do it here, not now, not after everything we've been through. And frankly, that's not an unreasonable ask. The government's got to strike a balance between meeting its obligations to asylum seekers and respecting the capacity and well-being of local communities. And right now, in Epping, it feels like that balance is completely off. What makes this even more frustrating is that the government's plans to end hotel use are admirable in theory. Hotels are expensive, they're not sustainable long-term, and they're not ideal for asylum seekers either, who often end up in limbo for months or even years. But the execution, at least in Epping's case, seems rushed and tone-deaf. You can't just shuffle people around without considering the impact on the places you're moving them to. You can't ignore a community that's already a breaking point and expect them to just suck it up and deal with it. And let's be honest, this whole situation is a political minefield for Starmer. Immigration and asylum are some of the most divisive issues in British politics. Get it wrong and you alienate voters. But you can't just ignore your legal and moral obligations to asylum seekers either. It's a tightrope walk, and right now, it doesn't look like the government's got its balance. Epping is angry, and they're not alone. There are communities all over the country dealing with similar challenges, and if the government doesn't start listening, if they don't start engaging meaningfully with local councils and residents, this is going to blow up in their faces. Chris Whitbread's letter is a stark reminder that policy decisions made in Westminster have real, tangible consequences for people on the ground. It's easy to sit in an office and draw up plans, but when those plans collide with reality, with fear, with trauma, with communities that feel overwhelmed, you've got a problem. And Epping's problem is the government's problem now, whether they like it or not. So, where does this leave us? Epping's council is demanding the government stop these proposals. Starmer's got a deadline looming to end hotel use, and in the middle of it all, you've got asylum seekers who just want somewhere safe to live, and communities who just want to feel heard and supported. It's messy, it's complicated, and there are no easy answers, but one thing's for sure, ignoring Chris Whitbread's letter, ignoring Epping's concerns, that's not going to make this go away. It's only going to make it worse. All right, that's it for today's deep dive into the absolute chaos unfolding in Epping. If you found this video helpful, or if you've got thoughts on this whole situation, drop them in the comments below. I want to hear from you. Do you think the government's being tone-deaf here, or are they just trying to do their best in an impossible situation? Let me know. And if you're not already subscribed to UK Political Insight, what are you waiting for? We're dropping videos every single day breaking down the biggest stories in British politics, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.